Desmond Tutu was considered the moral voice of South Africa. Now the Nobel Peace Prize laureate has died at the age of 90. The president expressed his grief. The South African anti-apartheid fighter and Nobel Peace Prize winner Desmond Tutu is dead. The Archbishop Emeritus died at the age of 90, as South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced on Sunday. He expressed on behalf of all South Africans his deep sorrow over the death of Tutu, said the head of state. Tutu was a real patriot. For many in South Africa and the world too, his life was a blessing, wrote his foundation. He was an extraordinary person. He took God, God's will, and God's creation dead serious, wrote Cape Town's Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. Desmond Tutu was one of the founding fathers of democratic South Africa. As a leader of the non-violent resistance to apartheid, he resolutely fought against racial discrimination and injustice. Even after the apartheid regime was overcome in 1994, Tutu persistently campaigned for peace and reconciliation with clear words. For a moral and ethical orientation in the new South Africa, Tutu was just as lacking in charisma and authority as his friend Nelson Mandela, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and first black president of the country. But Tutu didn't need political office to be heard. During apartheid, he condemned the systematic discrimination of the black majority as immoral and incompatible with God's word. In democratic South Africa, he then became an advocate for reconciliation between blacks and whites. Without forgiveness, there can be no future, were his words. In 1996, at Mandela's request, he took over the chairmanship of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which dealt with the crimes of the apartheid era, using Tutu's motto, "Forgive but don't forget." Millions saw Tutu on TV in tears as apartheid victims told the panel about their suffering. More than 20,000 victims, their relatives and other witnesses testified before the commission. 3,500 former perpetrators were granted waiver of prosecution. Many of his black fellow citizens, especially the families of the victims, found this too indulgent. For example, murderers were forgiven as long as they were ready to confess publicly. But Tutu was deeply convinced that reckoning could only harm his country. Forgiveness has less to do with Christian principles than with everyday real politics, he once said. Tutu fought for the vision of a rainbow nation in which people of all skin colors and ethnicities lived together peacefully. He was born on October 7th in 1931 in Klerksdorp near Johannesburg. His parents' money was not enough for his wish to become a doctor. Tutu therefore trained as a teacher, but gave up the profession in 1957 in protest against the discriminatory school policy of the apartheid regime. He then turned to theology and was ordained an Anglican priest at the age of 30. He studied further in London and in 1975 took over the post of superintendent of Johannesburg. There he quickly became a sharp critic of the apartheid state and called for peaceful change. While Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years, Tutu became the voice of resistance. Because of his demands for international sanctions against the government in Pretoria, his passport was revoked in 1980 and 1981. In 1984, the belligerent man of God was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent work against apartheid. In Oslo, he castigated the exorbitant human suffering caused by apartheid. 2 years later, Tutu became head of the 2 million Anglicans in South Africa. He held this office until autumn 1996. He repeatedly called the peaceful turn to democracy a miracle for which one should be grateful. However, that did not prevent him from criticizing the government and the ruling African National Congress, the ANC, when, in his opinion, things were going wrong. In the young democracy, that was tantamount to an insult to majesty. Tutu received a lot of criticism and increasingly withdrew from the public after the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. but you could see him dance there as well. Tutu rarely spoke politically, but then clearly. His criticism of the government of then-President Jacob Zuma did not stop. When the Dalai Lama was denied a visit to South Africa in 2014, apparently under pressure from China, he was angry. "I am ashamed to call this salivary bunch my government." With his own sense of humor, he said in January 1997 when he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, "It could have been worse. I could have lost my memory." His health recovered, although he had to be hospitalized several times from 2015. When he addressed the World AIDS Congress in a video message in 2016, he seemed thin but still keen. Already clearly frail, he presented himself again in public in September 2019 when the British Prince Harry introduced him to his family in Cape Town and he breathed a kiss on the forehead of his little son Archie. Tutu leaves behind his wife Leah, a son and 3 daughters. He would like to spend his last 24 hours with his family, he told the magazine Cicero in 2014, and added with a little twinkle in his eye, "I will tell them to take care of themselves and care for each other, especially their mother. Otherwise I will return and visit them." So he always had a lot of humor. The Nobel Prize Committee spoke of sad news in a statement, and German Federal Chancellor Olaf Scholz expressed his condolences in a letter. Desmond Tutu made a decisive contribution to ending apartheid in South Africa. He campaigned for the principles of humanity, freedom, and equality for life. Especially at Christmas time and in view of his death, these are values that we especially celebrate and that we uphold, the letter said. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson praised him as an important figure in the fight against apartheid and in building a new democratic South Africa. And David Sassoli, President of the European Parliament, described him as a real inspiration and a giant in the fight against South Africa's apartheid. And French President Emmanuel Macron made a similar statement. EU Council President Charles Michel called Tutu a giant who rose against apartheid. A man who has dedicated his life to freedom with a strong commitment to human dignity. As early as midday, people could be seen on TV pictures laying flowers in front of his monument in Cape Town's waterfront. As a bow to Tutu's legacy, the city administration wants to illuminate the landmark of the city, the Table Mountain, in Episcopal violet in the coming days. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.